views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
And hello, everyone, and welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I am Daren, Jaime, and of course, we thank you for joining us. If you ask the question, what is this show all about? Well, we take a look at the inequities that many people face. We present multiple points of view, promote civic engagement, and give you an opportunity to really meet some very informative guests. I want you to stay with us because guess what? The Social Justice Forums begins right now. And welcome back. Sapna NYC is a not-for-profit organization that's transforming the lives of South Asian immigrant women by improving health as well as expanding economic opportunities, creating social networks, and building a collective voice for change. And here now to share more, we are pleased to have the executive director of Sapna NYC, Diya Basu-Sen. And we thank you, Diya, for being with us.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me today. I look forward to our conversation.
It is. I'm looking forward to the conversation too. Talk to me a little bit about the organization itself, Sapna NYC, and as we talk about the work that you do, really catering to empowerment as well as advocacy.
Absolutely. So Sapna NYC, as you mentioned, works with South Asian immigrants, mainly through the women in the families as well as children. And our focus is really in building community power, building strong immigrant support. A lot of our families come and they don't necessarily understand systems in the US. They don't have networks. They don't have people to ask questions. And so we kind of serve as that point of entry for families. Our services are really holistic. So we believe that physical health, mental health, and women's empowerment are all linked together. And so women who come to our center can receive domestic violence support, they can receive mental health counseling, English classes, food assistance, and more, all in the same place.
And when we talk about the women that come through your doors, obviously a lot of needs. COVID has definitely ramped up needs for everyone. Talk about what are some of the basic needs that you're seeing many of your clients need.
Sure, absolutely. I think really COVID has changed our work a little bit, or I would really say expanded our work. So when the COVID crisis hit, our families are working class immigrant families. So there's some of the people that were hardest hit by the pandemic. We were seeing a lot of food insecurity, housing insecurity, a rise in domestic violence. So we started work in some of those areas that we traditionally haven't done as much work with, particularly with food insecurity. So in May of 2020, we started a food pantry. Over the course of the pandemic, we've distributed about 200,000 pounds of food, really focusing on culturally competent foods that they're often not able to get in a regular food pantry. And then in the East Bronx, we're pretty resource poor, so there just wasn't enough capacity in the pantries that did exist. We also connected families to over 150,000 in financial assistance. Some of it was rental assistance, some of it was from the Excluded Workers Fund from the state. Some of it was just micro grants from different private organizations. But we recognized that our family needed immediate financial and food assistance, and we grew those two areas of our work. But at the same time, we also saw that, as kind of, I'm sure you've seen as well, the mental impacts of the pandemic have been huge on our communities, on everyone really. But particularly in these communities where they've seen such high losses from COVID, they've had to deal with, again, fear of eviction, fear of not putting enough food on the table for their families. And so we started a mental health initiative last year. We were able for the first time to hire a mental health counselor that speaks Bengali and Hindi and is able to do both clinical counseling sessions, but also to approach mental health from a more traditional way that's rooted in our culture. So we run women's circles and domestic violence survivor circles, special needs circles, because we recognize, again, in our community, there's a lot of stigma around accessing mental health. And people aren't really used to using a service unless they have maybe a diagnosed mental health condition.
Yeah. So as we look right now, I know that some of the services that you talk about with them, in regards to empowerment, advocacy, those things are prevalent. But I want to also talk about one other area, which is citizenship, because when we talk about citizenship, pretty huge. But we talked a little bit about COVID just a few seconds ago, and knowing that the COVID-19 pandemic kind of like halted a lot of citizenship, put people on the back burner, if you will. How is it going by way of citizenship? And talk about some of the services that you provide in helping people in that area.
Absolutely. So for us, civic engagement is really important in building that community power and allowing our community members to be involved in the political process and to understand kind of what their rights are and also how they can be involved. So for us, it starts with just citizenship classes. And in those classes, we help women so that they're actually able to pass the citizenship test. It can be daunting, right? Even if you are born and raised here, there's so many questions that maybe you don't even know the answers to, but as immigrants, they're learning it in another language. So the classes help them actually understand what the questions are, understand what the day of will look like for the test so that they're not as nervous, and just kind of prep them for that. Once they finish, we also register them for vote and to vote, and we explain kind of the process of what the different positions are in our political system, what kind of some of the local elections are, so that they can actually be active citizens as well.
Yeah. And when you come as into a community, sometimes it's hard to learn the community, learn the culture. And I know that that's your job, to help to bridge the gap and also to be able to meet the needs of those persons that come. Give me a little bit of insight when you're dealing with your community and dealing with those constituents about their knowledge of rights, their knowledge of what's available to them, resources. Are we finding that people know a lot, or are they pretty much a novice when it comes to knowing about the resources and the rights that they have?
So we find that a lot of people actually don't know what their rights are, particularly for us, one of the areas that we do try and educate our community on is workers' rights, right? A lot of our community are doing kind of lower level positions, which leave them kind of open to exploitation. They're jobs where there aren't a lot of benefits, and they, again, easily can be exploited if they don't know what their rights are and to ask for them and how to advocate for them. So we do talk to them about workers' rights. We also, around elections, talk about voting rights too. So being immigrants and, again, English not being their first language, what are their rights to language assistance? What are their rights if they have a disability and they need help? Some of those things. And then we also just have conversations about, what are the actual positions that you're voting for, or what are the ballot measures and what does it mean? Last election, we also did a lot of work around ranked choice voting because that was something completely new as well.
Yeah, education and the voting process could be, I mean, even for those of us who are familiar with voting, when it came to ranked choice voting, I think a lot of New Yorkers really struggle with just being able to navigate and bridge that gap. And so what's it like for you in terms of community? When we say community, I mean support from leaders, officials, and really galvanizing around your community in terms of meeting needs, in terms of making it happen. What's it been like for you?
Sure. So that's always an ongoing process, with the elected officials. And I think we just saw a lot of turnover, right, in the city council this past year. So we're really excited about kind of the new people we have, and we've already started working with them on kind of different projects. And I think we've gotten we've had good reception from them to ideas and to trying to work for our communities. So we do try and engage with elected officials, whether it's city council, state assembly, state senators, to kind of not only offer our services because we want to serve as a referral for any families that come to them, but also to kind of bring awareness of the issues that our community is facing, because unless you have those conversations, they may not be aware of some of the specific needs that our community has.
Yeah. Health, a big issue in our borough. We know that in the borough of the Bronx, of course, 62 out of 62 when it comes to how we rank, but we're always looking at ways of improving health. I can talk from the perspective of doing this for a long time and knowing that sometimes access to resources when it comes to health aren't always prevalent in our community. Talk to us about your path of dealing with the health disparity that's going on right now.
Absolutely. So our work in health kind of covers a lot of different areas. And generally what we think about when we design health programs is there a program that exists? And if so, kind of what are the issues in terms of access? And maybe it means that there is a program and there's just not enough information and we need to help with that kind of connection. Or maybe it means the actual program itself just isn't appropriate for our community. So kind of to give you an example with COVID vaccines, right? The services were there, but our community wasn't always receiving the messages. The language skills weren't really there necessarily to have people answer questions about, safety or, can I mix boosters or things like that. And also, right, a lot of times doctors don't necessarily take the time to actually have those conversations with patients. So in that case, what we helped with is, again, how doing outreach about the vaccines themselves, what is, safe for your families, who's eligible, at which point in the pandemic, and also actually making appointments for people because that digital literacy also was missing. We also had vaccine events where people could actually come to our offices and get vaccinated on site as well. So in that case, it really was just a matter of connecting them to those resources. In other cases, maybe those resources don't actually even exist for our community. So a couple of years ago, we started a diabetes prevention program. And that was something where we felt that the mainstream programs just really missed our community completely. One, again, because of that language piece, but also because the recommendations they were making were all based on American culture and tradition. So they didn't know what questions to ask sometimes when it came to diet. The recipes or suggestions they made had kind of no relation to what our families normally eat at home. And then also certain kind of things around exercise culturally, some of those things just weren't as well received by our community or as accessible for our community in terms of going to a gym or things like that. So we created a fitness program that we actually delivered in our sessions where women were able to have ideas of ways to exercise that actually didn't require them to have a membership or to purchase any equipment. We delivered a DPP program that actually taught them about their own diet and how to amend it, and did individual conversations about, where are the gaps and where can we make those adjustments. And we saw really great results with a lot of A1C scores dropping, a lot of weight loss as well. And so that's something that we're hoping to bring back as well now that kind of we're emerging from this pandemic.
Great work there. Talk to me about your work with the Bangladesh community, because I know a lot of your population comes from Bangladesh. Can you give us some insight into the Bangladesh community that maybe we're not so familiar with?
Sure, absolutely. So I think in Parkchester, we have a really large Bangladeshi community, but we also work with families throughout the boroughs as well. And a lot of the needs we're seeing are, again, around language. So we deliver English classes. Digital literacy is actually a huge need. We have a lot of people who are interested in developing their computer skills. It's actually something that was born out of a community meeting we had where women were saying that, in order to get jobs, in order to better help my children at school, I really need to have computer skills. And I think it's something that we also have seen in this pandemic, that digital divide really meant a huge difference between people getting services and having access to benefits and not. So we started a computer literacy program, and we teach 4 levels of computer classes, starting from, this is how you turn on a computer, this is how you hold a mouse, going all the way to Microsoft Excel. And again, that's to help with people wanting to work, but also just kind of for daily needs like internet searches or being able to apply for benefits. And then the other piece, again, that I mentioned earlier is the mental health. In addition to that physical health need, I think unless we address the mental health needs of our community that really existed prior to the pandemic, but were exacerbated by the pandemic, I think it's really hard for communities to be strong and healthy.
You do a great job of galvanizing the community and putting them together. I know you've got these action groups. Share with us about how you get community, because we talk about promoting civic engagement, a portion of our show. You do a great job of really promoting civic engagement amongst those. So how do you get your action groups going, and how do you get them out there for the causes?
Sure. So as a community-based organization, we're committed to actually hiring people from within the community, and also making sure we engage with the community and have our women centered in the work. So our community health workers, our frontline staff are all from the community, but we also use these action groups, as you mentioned, when we have particular projects. And they could be health programs, they could be civic engagement. It's not necessarily only for civic engagement, but in these programs, we actually train groups of women on whatever issue area we're talking about. And we also train them on how to do effective outreach and leadership. And then they kind of go out into the community and serve as ambassadors for that cause. And they help us really reach some of those pockets of the community that we just don't have entry into. So to give you an example, with this 2020 census, we had an action group of about 10 women. And with those women, we were able to help around 800 families actually complete the census. And we did outreach to about 4,000 families.
Big numbers there in terms of reaching out to people, because sometimes when we look out there, you see that the people just don't know, and reaching out makes a difference, and being able to connect. I want to talk about your connection, because I know that some of the work that you do actually, it transcends on a local level, but then it also transcends on a national level, right? Going to Washington D.C. And being able to lobby and to be able to speak to particular issues. You educate your group on how to be able to do that. What's that been like for them to have the experience of knowing, listen, we can talk about this on a local level, but then we could also have our voices heard on a national level to try to possibly even create change?
Yeah, so I think for us, we're really committed to raising the voices of our community and also trying to empower them to use their own voices as well. So we do have them sometimes join us in meetings with elected officials. And if they are not able to join, to make sure that we're bringing these issues that we're seeing on the ground to the people who are in office. And so we work in coalition with other groups. And one of the big things that we're fighting for is budget equity, because we see that in New York City, particularly, right, the Asian population is growing. We're almost 18% right now. But in terms of how much funding our organizations get, it's just nowhere close. And so a lot of our work is just for budget equity on a city level, on a state level, on a national level, to make sure that in coalition with these other organizations that we're lifting up our communities and making sure they're getting their fair share.
Yeah. Diya, Basu-Sen, we got to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us. I think a great conversation, giving us some insight into the work of Sapna. She's the executive director of Sapna NYC. And if people want more information, what do they do?
Sure, we're happy to have you all reach out to us if you want to volunteer, if you need any services. The best way is to email us, info@sapnanyc.org, or to give us a call, 718-828-9772. But you can also look at our website, it's sapnanyc.org, for a lot of information on some of the programs that I didn't mention today, and as well to get in touch with us. Thank you so much for having me.
Diya, thank you so much. And I want to let you know, we want you to stay with us here on the show. We've got more coming up. We're going to take a quick break on the social justice forums. We'll return right after this. The United Way of New York City is a not-for-profit organization that's dedicated to helping low-income New Yorkers make ends meet and also lead self-sufficient lives. Now, its job is to break down, or I should say the mission is to help mobilize communities to break down barriers, as well as build opportunities to improve the lives of low-income New Yorkers for the benefit of all. We're pleased to have sharing with us here on the Social Justice Forum's the Vice President of Food and Benefits Way of New York City, Cheryl Huber. And Cheryl, glad to have you.
Thank you so much, Daren. I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you. An important time for this conversation. When we talk about food insecurity in New York, the numbers do continue to rise, as we know that more and more New Yorkers are dealing with food insecurity, particularly with the COVID pandemic, and then also with inflation. What have you been seeing on your end?
Absolutely, Daren. We know that 1.5 million New Yorkers are now suffering from food insecurity, meaning that they don't know if they're going to be able to feed their family in the coming days and weeks. So, with 1.5 million New Yorkers suffering from food insecurity, that's an increase of 36% since pre-pandemic levels. And with the rising cost of food, inflation, it's only getting worse. And it really puts a strain on our emergency food system, food pantries and soup kitchens that are working to feed New Yorkers every day.
And when we talk about that strain, how bad has it gotten over the course of the last few weeks? Or I should say months, I should say.
Yeah, the strain has gotten a lot worse with inflation. I think that we know that employment has gotten a little bit better. People are getting back to work, but the rising cost of food has really put an impact on everyday New Yorkers who are just trying to feed their families. We're seeing lines at food pantries, getting bad because of this increased cost. People who may not have relied on food pantries before are now needing that emergency food access.
So talk to me about food and benefit access, the work that United Way is doing, and how you're trying to bridge that gap.
Well, our work really is about supporting the emergency food network. So, United Way is a backbone organization. We really provide capacity building support for organizations around the city that are working directly with New Yorkers. We know New York City. We know the challenges that are being faced here, particularly in the post-COVID, phase. And in our food and benefits access team, what we really work on is making sure that all New Yorkers who rely on emergency food can have a dignified experience. They can have access to healthy, nutritious choices, and that choice is a big part of it, so that you're not just handed something when you arrive at a food pantry, but rather it's more of a grocery store experience. So we support 500 emergency food providers across the city. That's food pantries and soup kitchens in every borough, to really help them build their capacity so that they can provide the best service possible to New Yorkers. And we do that through workshops and trainings, cooking demonstrations, nutrition education, a wide variety of tools, really.
Yeah. And when we talk about having these tools and these resources, very much needed during a time like this. Obviously, the hand is out by so many people looking for assistance to try to help them through. And really, I don't always say a hand out, but also a hand up, right? Just trying to be able to help people to level up to be where they are. And you've got a great team, but I want to talk about your food team and the impact of that it's had during COVID.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. We work with, again, a very wide variety of organizations. We work closely with POTS, part of the Solutions, which is the largest food pantry in the Bronx. So not only are we ensuring that New Yorkers can access food and have this dignified experience where they can choose and get healthy options, we also are working to make sure that every New Yorker who is eligible for SNAP or food stamp benefits can receive those. So we partner with community-based organizations that really know their neighbors, speak the languages of their neighbors, and can handhold them through that process, which can be challenging. It is a bureaucratic process to enroll in the SNAP program, but we know that many New Yorkers qualify but are not enrolling. So we want to make sure that everyone who is entitled to receive those funds to purchase food can access that. And so that's a big part of our work as well, really just walking people through the process, ensuring that they have a partner in their community that can help them do that.
Yeah. What are some of the barriers that we're actually seeing out there? Because we know that we talk about access is there, but yet and still there's so many barriers, sometimes to access and barriers to resources. So from your perspective, when we're talking about food and poverty, what are some of the barriers?
Again, I think language access is a really big one. If you are an immigrant not from this country, you may not be aware that you can apply and qualify for SNAP. If, you know, it's a complicated system, and I think there's a lot of myths out there and misunderstandings about who can qualify. If you are an undocumented parent, but you have a citizen child, for example, you can get SNAP benefits for your child. So there's a lot of, you know, complicated rules involved in the SNAP program in particular. So I think, you know, one thing that we really want to do is educate people one by one, really have those conversations to make sure that, you know, people are able to get the help that they need to feed their families. It's a public health issue. You know, we're coming out of a pandemic. We've seen huge impacts on our communities, mental health, physical health, and nutritious food is a big part of supporting people in their general health. So we want to make sure that everyone out there, you know, has the help that they need, and really can get through those barriers to access the help that they need to feed their families.
Yeah, I was looking at my notes, and you know, these statistics really were startling to me. In New York City, 2 out of 5 working age households don't have enough income to cover necessities like food, rent, childcare, healthcare, and even their taxes. Right now, 3 million New Yorkers are currently struggling to find and to afford, I should say, healthy food. 1.3 million relying on soup kitchen and pantries in order to find their next meal. And as these numbers continue to rise, quite scary.
Mm-hmm. It is very scary. It is. And, you know, I think what we saw during the pandemic was a really incredible alignment of government, private, nonprofit partners all coming together and recognizing the problem and putting resources, smart resources towards solving that challenge. And now with pandemic sort of fading a little bit into the rear view, you know, we know that those resources are still needed. As we've talked about, inflation, you know, food costs rising. We don't want people to have to rely on emergency food, but the reality is many people still do because of these other factors. And so, you know, it was a wonderful thing to see additional support for benefits and, you know, the eviction moratorium and you know, more resources for pantries and soup kitchens. We want to continue to see that because the reality is that too many New Yorkers are still struggling. You know, despite what the sort of common belief might be, we know that these challenges are still out there and very much a reality for everyday people.
Yeah. Talk about food, but food is one point, but then there's also employment and underemployment. Share with us a little bit about the work in workforce development, because that's pretty critical, because in addition to being able to feed yourself, you're going to be able to have a job and to be able to part of, you know, sustainable in the workforce. Talk to us about the workforce development.
Yeah, well, one of the most exciting projects I think that we are working on at United Way through workforce development is the Together We Thrive initiative, which is really about supporting Black-owned businesses in the city and helping them get access to marketing tools and you know, the outreach support and business development support that they need. So that's been a really exciting project that launched sort of during COVID, as we saw so many small businesses going away, leaving neighborhoods and having to shut down. And also at the same time, realizing that New York City, you know, we think of it as an extremely diverse place. We actually don't have a huge number of Black-owned businesses. So we want to make sure that that network is supported and really has the resources to continue to thrive and to support communities.
Yeah, United Way has been around for a minute, and when I say a minute, that means a long minute, a long time. That's code for a long time. And as we talk about being around a long time, its hand in really assisting organizations and partnering with organizations to play a significant role in helping the lives of so many New Yorkers, it can be underscored. So let's talk for a minute about your organization and how you feel the impact you guys have been able to make down through the years, even up to right till now.
Absolutely. We have been so hard at work since, particularly in the last couple of years, during the pandemic. We really are a backbone organization. So we not only provide funding to local community-based organizations to support, throughout the city, but we also really help to provide infrastructure network that CBOs can lean on and can learn from and learn from each other through United Way. So we're a convener. We bring people together. We have networks of not only food providers, but in the other aspects of our work, we have a justice and opportunities unit. We have a unit that focuses on education, working with community schools. So, we're really focused on the issues that impact everyday New Yorkers and that are most critical to bringing people out of poverty. During the pandemic, we saw just such an increased need from those systems, from our education system, from our food system, from our small business communities. United Way really worked to make sure that all of those different aspects of New York City life had the resources that they needed. We shoveled funding as much as we could towards those efforts in every community in the city. And I think that's something that we have been able to do really well because of the relationships that we have, the longevity, as you mentioned, that we have in not only in New York City, but really across the country and the world. United Way has been a network supporter that's a critical voice for those who don't always have a voice in the city.
As we set our sights towards the summer and really warmer weather, any plans for the future for the organization, and what can we be on the lookout for?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the summer brings with it a lot of wonderful things, a lot of access to fresh produce. We have, our growing season comes in the summer. United Way has been partnering with New York State on an initiative called Nourish New York, where we are pairing emergency food providers with fresh produce from local farms. So we're making sure that the produce that anyone can, buy at the farmer's market is the same produce that's available to New Yorkers at food pantries and soup kitchens, which is just a wonderful thing. Really provides such a dignified experience for New Yorkers that are in need. So we're really excited to continue that initiative together with the New York State Department of Health and the Department of Agriculture and Markets.
How can people partner with the work that United Way is doing? Obviously, the public plays a great part in helping and helping some of these organizations. How can the public continue to play a part?
Absolutely. We rely on New Yorkers to engage on the community level. We have, of course, our website, unitedwaynyc.org. We have a wonderful social media feed where you can find out about events and initiatives that we're working on. So I would encourage everyone to sign up through those methods and get in touch with us.
Yeah. What for you is the best part of the job? I mean, is it the fact that you're able to actually bridge the gap or seeing the impact in people's lives? Talk to me about what you find to be the best part of the job.
Oh, I'm so lucky to have my job. I love over the last few weeks, I've spent time visiting a few of our food pantries and kitchens out throughout the 5 boroughs, and really just meeting the critical partners, the people that run these pantries and kitchens every day that are out there feeding people, whether it's out in the cold or in the sun, they're out there every day doing that work, and they're incredibly dedicated. It's a really amazing network that we have in New York City, and we need to continue to support it to make sure that our neighbors have access to those wonderful places and resources.
Well, Cheryl, we're going to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us. Cheryl Huber, Vice President for Food and Benefits Access for United Way of New York City. Thank you so much for sharing us with us and letting us know some of the things that are going on. And certainly as food and food insecurity continues to hit hard and ravaged New York City. We're glad that we have agencies like United Way partnering with so many other people to help to make a difference. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
All righty,
Take
Cheryl
care.
Huber, our guest. Thank you. Listen, and we want you to stay with us. We do have more here on the Social Justice Forums. Don't go anywhere. We're returning in a few. And welcome back to the show. Our next guest was born into a Bronx home, embodying the opportunities provided by this great borough and the city. Now she's replaced Mark Jonai as the representative for the City Council of District 13, which includes 18 neighborhoods spanning the East Bronx, like City Island, Morris Park, Pelham Parkway. And joining us now, we are pleased to have the council member of District 13, Marjorie Velázquez. And Councilwoman, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been quite a week this week.
Yeah, it's been quite a week, and we'll start off with news right in your area. As we talked about some of the area that you represent, Morris Park, huge fire, and a lot of people were displaced. But talk to us about what's going on there, and give us a little rundown.
Around 3 a.m., There was a massive fire. It was a 3 alarm fire, and thankfully there were no fatalities. There were some injuries, including some firefighters that were hurt on scene. We want to make sure that we know that we appreciate their work, and that the rest of the community know that their hard work paid off, and that our families were safe. And so unfortunately, this fire did displace many families. Right now, they're staying at hotels, and we, together with the borough president, Office of Emergency Management, HPD, DOB, FDNY, NYPD, probably missing a couple of other, and the Red Cross, most importantly, and New York City Hospitality Alliance have been working together to make sure that we're attending to the residents' needs. More importantly, that we have a path for them to find permanent shelter.
Yeah, and I know that you mentioned there's a school that actually did a good job in terms of opening their doors during this time.
Yeah, the school literally opened their doors, provided meals to family, and just a space for us to just heal. And it also gave a space to Red Cross to have intake for us. And so it just, especially after, right in between the shooting happened. So it was a lot for a lot of families, and just having that space to heal. Guidance counselors were also available to the families, so that if they needed to grieve, we were there. It's always about providing that safe space. So I just really want to thank Superintendent Ed Tom, Principal Allen, the whole community, the whole school of Icon Charter 5.
Yeah, a lot going on in your district. Trying to walk through a few of the things, but I want you to share a little bit about the Latina Health Initiative, because this is a very special event.
It is. For us, look, I am a Puerto Rican woman. I know too well the challenges, right? I'm the first person of color to be elected in the district. And so when we're talking about what we do, we take care of each other. And right now, Latinas are the highest rate of suicide, Latina high school students. So our initiative is to focus not only on making sure that they have the right mental health care, right? So we're focused on looking at funding proper mental health facilities, programs, nonprofits, but also looking at other ways that we build up the community by providing access to quality jobs, access to care. And then, you know, for me, I am of birthing age, and me and my husband are looking forward to having a family. And so we also have to look at right now what it is for Latinas and Black and Brown women on having kids, right? And the maternal morbidity rates for us in the Bronx are the highest. And so we also are looking into how do we make sure that we have safe space, but also what's going on, right?
Right.
And looking at providing the right policy, and also funding midwives, funding doulas, and bringing into the Bronx a women's health center, a women's birthing center, because we have yet to have that while the other boroughs in the city do.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about parks and infrastructure, because the Bronx, of course, one of the largest boroughs when it comes to parks, putting the park space to use. I know that you're, talking about the climate action plan. For somebody who may not be so familiar about the climate action plan.
So I am super excited, right? I love the fact that I can proudly say I have the largest park in all of New York City, with Pelham Bay Park, 3 times the size of Central Park, just for folks that don't know. And it's also, yeah, I know, like we all like celebrate our birthdays. I certainly am a August baby, so every single birthday would be a barbecue out there, and it would be fun, right? But folks don't understand how large it is, and the inequity we face here, right? And so what we're doing together with the Parks Chair, Shaker Krishnan, is basically saying our green spaces belong to us, and we need to be better about that and create a real plan. So we are committed to working with our partners in government to build new catch basins, rain gardens, flood mitigation measures, just to prevent these floods that we have been seeing as recently as Ida. We're also looking to invest over $10 million in our local parks to make sure that they are fun and that they are safe and that we are using more permeable spaces to absorb the rainwater. Lastly, City Island. We all love it because of its seafood, right? And it's investing, right? Investing in how we're looking at the City Island Oyster Reef project, where we're looking at the restoration. So turning into this gateway project. Right now it's like a parking lot, but how can we go ahead and make it more welcoming to all, right? And how can we actually change City Island even more so to reflect the importance of the green space that it is, and more importantly, the climate changes that we could apply there, the climate action plan that we could apply that would help residents throughout the district within the waterfront.
When you look at the green space right now, obviously you talk about having that largest park in all of New York City. A lot needs to be tended to. Talk to me about when you look at where we are today. Are you satisfied with some of the progress that you've seen thus far in terms of trying to improve green space and make things better?
Well, this is what me and Shaker are trying to do, right? And I would have to say the members of the Parks Committee as a whole, our whole belief is that our Parks agency has been drastically, underfunded. And then what we're looking at least a 1% investment that would bring more PEP officers, more maintenance crews, but more importantly, more abilities for our families to take this space, this green space that belongs to us, and make it their own. COVID literally showed our families the importance of this space, right? When we couldn't go out, where did everybody flock to? To Pelham Bay Park, to Orchard Beach,
Right.
to the outdoor spaces. And there are districts like Shakers that don't have parks. And so we really need to look throughout the city and make sure that it is equitable, that we are fully funding that 1%, so all our communities can enjoy time in green spaces.
Yeah. I want to walk through and share a little bit more about the work that's going on in your community, and you've got a lot going on, but talk to me a little bit about this here, because we talk about the issue of healthcare. I know that's something that you're very passionate about, and bringing about health equity. How do you see things, and what are you working on in that particular area in dealing with the disparities?
So it is working on multiple levels. So the first quarter, if you have this year, my colleagues have been teaming up with one another in different committees to make sure that we're exploring what happened during COVID. What were the responses? What were the lessons that we can learn, and how can we apply it going forward? You've had hearings after hearings focus not only on the simple stuff of like, COVID. So I did price gouging with the COVID task force chair, which is Francisco Moya, the council member in Queens. And so it is uniting those different groups. And what we did was explore what were the policies during the pandemic and what can we be better about, what were the guidelines that were there. And we found that there weren't any written guidelines. And that was challenging for us, right? Because how do we hold bad actors accountable? So those are kind of like the lessons we learned under my committee, which is consumer worker protection. But something even more forward-looking is healthcare, right? What can the hospital system do better at, right? The private and the public, uniting when it comes to purchasing, right? Uniting when it comes to storage of goods, and what the how do we roll it out into our communities? What's fair? What's equitable? And that's kind of the conversation, because we all remember what happened at Elmhurst. And that was an opportunity I had actually to work with Councilmember Moya. During the pandemic, it was making sure that Elmhurst had all the resources that they needed. And it literally was having these tough calls to make sure that we were all working together.
Yeah. If you will, I know we have another program that you're working with right now, expanding the city's industrial business zone program to District 13, and share with us a little bit about that.
So the industrial business zone program, what we're looking forward to is making sure that we're empowering our small businesses, right? Literally held it down for all of us, right? And how do we go back and say, thank you? right? We had so many different opportunities to thank our essential workers, but we often forget that the small businesses, the small mom and pops were there for us too. So it is looking at initiatives. It is working with different groups to make sure that we're providing grants to families, businesses, especially small ones that were here for our communities and certainly have delivered time and time again, right? For me, one of the biggest dangers to a community is an empty storefront, right? Because we can be better. We can make sure our communities thrive, and it is investing back into our small businesses, right? So it is looking at ways that we can reduce fines and penalties by literally doing a walkthrough of the business and saying, hey, this is a potential fine, this is a potential violation. Let's work together to make sure that you address it within a timely manner. And then we can go ahead and figure it out. So that way we're actually helping our communities, right? And we're working in unison to build the community up. That's our first and foremost priority. When we're looking at what's the goals that we can do, is looking at the bids, right? Right now, we took a vote in the council to unite 3 bids in Queens, and strengthens it, right? So that way, when they're making purchases, when they're actually working on issues, they have a greater voice as a solid 3 bid that now has expanded and created to this way larger 1 bid down there. So like looking at that into our district and see what that potential looks like. And so it's a unique opportunity to really deliver.
Yeah. So as we look forward to the future, talk to me a little bit about what you're working on and what can we expect coming out of District 13?
Well, legislatively, we're still working on the open dining bill. We want to make sure that when we're talking about equity, right, we're going back to this word because remember, out of borough, out of mind is no longer. We're making sure that the Bronx stands out and the outer boroughs have a fair chance. So when we're looking at outdoor dining, that we're involving our communities and that we're expanding the licenses. During the pandemic, we saw the licenses in the Bronx jump from 30 to 650. That's right, our families stood to have a chance to eat outdoors. And so what we're teaming up, we're touring every single borough, we're sitting down with borough presidents and different community members, whether they're business groups or community board members, we're sitting down at the table, if you will, and talking about what works for our communities and what doesn't work for our communities. We don't want to have a one-size-fit-all approach because that usually undermines and forgets a lot of people. So here it is. This is the opportunity. So we're having a lot of fun with that, and we're looking forward to having more conversations and drafting that legislation sometime this year. What we're also looking forward to is teaming up with our folks, right? Budget season is over in the state, but it's certainly alive and well in New York City. And so we just released a couple of our preliminary response to the mayor's budget. And we're really looking forward to how we guide with a moral compass that really protects us all. And it doesn't forget the outer boroughs, that we're really looking forward to making sure we have livable wages for folks and families first and priority, right? Our families are going to be taken care of, that we are making sure that our families also have an opportunity to have mental health addressed, either in schools, either at workplace, that we're uniting folks all, okay?
Lastly, before I let you go, I want to talk to you because you're the first Latino representative, woman, I should say, ever to represent her district. And as a Latina, talk to us about what that means for you and the significance.
Es un orgullo total, right? Look, my parents came in from Puerto Rico. My dad and my grandfather moved to Indian Village. That was where they first moved into, right? My dad's first job here was frying frog legs out of Johnny's Reef in City Island. So now here I stand, his daughter, representing the district as the first person of color ever as a city council member is huge. And it means the world to me. It's a lot of weight on my shoulders, yes, but I want to make sure that, yes, I am the first, but I'm not the last. And that we are having conversations on empowerment and what does that look like within community? And more importantly, how do we make sure that our youth is activated? How do we engage folks in our communities to believe in themselves and understand that I'm here for everyone, and more importantly, that this energy that you see here is nonstop, and it is going to make sure that we're driving home what our beliefs are, which is community first. What I saw yesterday, what I keep on seeing, is that when times are tough, my community stands tall. They open their doors, and that, you know what, I think the rest of the world needs to see leadership like that and community like this, more importantly.
Yeah. Well, Councilwoman, we're going to let you go. Thank you so much for being with us here on the Social Justice Forums, letting us know what's happening in District 13. Councilwoman Marjorie Velázquez, and we thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Take care.
All righty. We want to let you know, viewers, yes, we are at the end of our show. I want to thank you for joining us, and hopefully you've enjoyed our guests as we continue to elevate the conversation, talk about the issues that matter most, and bring you some information that can hopefully be able to give you some enlightenment. So for all of us here on the Social Justice Forums, I'm Daren Jaime saying take care. You can watch us here on BronxNet channel 67. And again, that's where you'll be able to catch the recablecast. If you want to see us on the web, BronxNet.org. And of course, BronxNet TV is our social media platforms. We'll talk to you next week on the Social Justice Forums.